Athens, a peaceful paradise of bearded philosophers discussing logic in clean white togas? No, that is just a hallucination created by Victorian historians. The real Athens? It was a city built on the most successful scam in human history. Yes, exactly a scam. You did not hear me wrong. We call them the inventors of democracy, but we forget that their democracy was powered by slavery and funded by extorting their neighbor protection racket. We call them the architects of logic, but their leader, Draco, wrote laws so toxic that the punishment for stealing a cabbage was death. Athens wasn't a civilization, it was a server stress test. It was a glitchy, violent, and arrogant experiment that rose from the mud, defeated the biggest empire on Earth by sheer luck, and then destroyed itself because it didn't know when to stop pressing the war button. So forget the sanitized history books. Let's look at the dirty, bloody code behind the cradle of Western civilization. Welcome to the entire history of Athens. Let's rewind the clock to 1100 BC. The Bronze Age collapse. If you are a gamer, you know what a server wipe looks like. The connection drops, the screen goes black, and everyone gets kicked out of the lobby. That is exactly what happened to the ancient world. The mighty Mycenaean palaces? Deleted. The trade networks? Crashed. The administrative structures? 404 not found. Entire civilizations like Pylos and Telis were completely abandoned, fading into obscurity. But then there was Athens. For some inexplicable reason, maybe a glitch in the code, or maybe they were just too stubborn to quit, Athens didn't disconnect. While the rest of Greece fell into the Dark Ages, losing their population and even forgetting how to write, Athens just kept running in low power mode. They survived the apocalypse, but surviving doesn't mean thriving. For the next few centuries, Athens was basically an anarchy server. The kings were replaced by a group of wealthy aristocrats called archons. Think of them as the pay-to-win whales who bought all the best gear and refused to let anyone else play. They expanded their territory across Attica, creating a massive gap between the rich and the poor. The poor were starving, angry, and ready to burn the whole server down. The ruling elite realized they needed to restore order. So in 621 BC, they hired a guy named Draco to write the city's first legal code. Draco was the original toxic admin. He looked at the chaotic server and decided the ban hammer wasn't heavy enough. You stole an apple? Death penalty.
You were caught being lazy? Death penalty. You committed murder? Okay, also death penalty, but that one actually makes sense. His laws were so brutal that people said they weren't written in ink, but in blood. This is literally where we get the word draconian. Draco didn't fix the inequality. He just made it illegal to complain about it. Unsurprisingly, threatening to execute your entire player base for minor infractions doesn't improve morale. The tensions got worse. The city was on the verge of a civil war. The Draco update was a total disaster. Enter Solon. In 594 BC, Solon was brought in as the new lead developer to fix Draco's mess, and he dropped patch 1.0. First, he abolished debt slavery. Yes, before this, if you couldn't pay your bills, you literally became a slave.
Solon said, no more of that. Second, he restructured the class system. Instead of being powerful because of your noble bloodline, which is just RNG, your status was now based on your wealth. He divided citizens into 4 classes based on how much property they farmed. It wasn't perfect, it was still a grind-based system, but for the first time, a poor player could theoretically grind their way to the top. Solon saved the server from crashing, but he didn't fix the core gameplay loop. The factions were still fighting, the aristocrats were still greedy, and the people wanted more than just a patch. They wanted a new operating system.
Solon's patch 1.0 was a noble effort, but let's be honest, it was buggy. It didn't stop the factional infighting. In fact, it left a security backdoor so wide open that a tyrant named Pisistratus walked right in and seized power in 561 BC. For a while, the server was run by a dictator, but in 508 BC, the system finally crashed. The people revolted, kicked out the tyrant's son, and cleared the way for the true architect of the Athenian code, Cleisthenes. Cleisthenes didn't just want to patch the game, he wanted to install an entirely new operating system. He looked at the powerful noble families who had been griefing the server for centuries and decided to nerf them into oblivion. He radically reorganized the political structure, breaking the power of these families by creating new administrative divisions based on geography, not bloodlines. He introduced the Council of 500 to manage the daily grind of legislation. This was the official launch of Democracy 1.0. But this new OS came with one of the most hilarious and toxic features in gaming history, ostracism. The developers realized that some players were just too good. If a politician became too popular or too powerful, the citizens could vote to ban him. They would scratch a name on a piece of pottery, an ostracon, and if you got enough votes, you were kicked out of the city for 10 years. Think about that. It wasn't a punishment for a crime.
It was a mechanism to prevent anyone from seizing too much power. It was literally the community coming together to say, "Bro, you are winning too hard. Get out of the lobby." With the internal toxic players finally handled, the Athenian server felt stable. But while they were busy moderating their own chat, they forgot to check the firewall for external hackers. Just as Athens finished installing this new update, the global chat lit up with a terrifying notification. The Persian Empire had declared war. In 499 BC, Athens had foolishly sent troops to help the Ionian Greeks rebel against Persian control. This poke at the bear provoked the Persian emperor, Darius I, to launch a full-scale invasion of mainland Greece. This wasn't a war. This was a boss fight.
The Persian Empire was the pay-to-win giant of the era, massive, wealthy, and seemingly invincible. Athens was a tiny, chaotic city-state running experimental software. In 490 BC, the first round began at Marathon. The Persian army landed, ready to steamroll the Greeks. But the Persians were suffering from severe server lag. They were fighting on unfamiliar terrain, and their light armor was no match for the heavy metal meta of the Greek hoplites. The Athenian force, predominantly made up of these heavy infantry units, charged the beach. It was a Zerg rush. They smashed the Persian lines before the invaders could even set up their archers. Against all odds, the Athenians defeated the army of Emperor Darius I. Legend has it, a messenger named Phidipedes ran 26 miles back to Athens to announce the victory, creating the modern marathon race, before collapsing. But the Persians weren't done. They just went back to the menu to respawn. 10 years later, in 480 BC, Darius' son Xerxes logged in with a massive invasion force. This time, they bypassed the defenses at Thermopylae. Sorry, Sparta, you tried, and marched straight for Athens. The Athenians did the only thing they could. They evacuated. The Persians captured the empty city and burned it to the ground. The server of Athens was physically destroyed. But the Athenian navy was still online. The final showdown took place at Salamis in September 480 BC. The Persian fleet was massive. But Xerxes made a fatal error. He tried to cram his giant armada into the narrow straits of Salamis. It was a traffic jam of epic proportions. The Persian ships were too big and too slow to maneuver. The smaller, faster Athenian triremes danced around them, ramming and sinking the enemy vessels. The Athenian navy, along with their allies, destroyed the Persian fleet. The Goliath had lagged out. By 479 BC, the Greeks had successfully driven the Persians out of Greece entirely. Athens had survived the stress test. They had defeated the superpower. But this victory did something dangerous to their ego. They started to think they were invincible. They started to think they were the main character. And as we know, when a player gets too arrogant, they usually turn into the villain. Athens was about to transition from a defender of freedom to the biggest bully in the Mediterranean. So Athens saved the world. They defeated the Persian boss. They were the heroes of the server. But as the quote goes, you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Athens chose the second option, and they did it with style. In the aftermath of the Persian Wars,
Athens founded a club called the Delian League. On paper, this was a coalition of the willing, a noble alliance of Greek city-states formed to continue the fight against the Persians in Asia and protect the Aegean Sea. Think of it as an ancient NATO. Every member state contributed ships or money to a shared treasury located on the sacred island of Delos. It sounds fair, right? Wrong. It was a protection racket.
Athens, possessing the largest navy, slowly transformed this alliance into the Athenian Empire. They went from being the team captain to the Mafia Don. They went around to the smaller islands, places like Naxos or Thasos, and essentially said, "That is a very nice city you have there. It would be a shame if the Persians came back and burned it. Pay us tribute, and we will protect you." And if you tried to leave the club, Athens would show up with their fleet, blockade your port, tear down your walls, and force you to pay even more. They demanded tribute and asserted total control over the other member states. And the mastermind behind this operation? Pericles. Pericles is often hailed as the champion of democracy.
He led Athens from 461 BC to 429 BC, a period we call the Golden Age. But let's look at his finances. In 454 BC, Pericles pulled off the ultimate heist. He moved the League's treasury from the neutral island of Delos to Athens. He took the money that was meant for common defense and treated it like his personal city beautification fund. He looked at the Acropolis, which was still a burnt ruin from the Persian invasion, and decided to flex. He launched a massive construction program. The crown jewel of this project was the Parthenon, completed in 438 BC. Look at it. It is magnificent. It is an architectural marvel of the ancient world. But let's call it what it really is, a money laundering operation.
The Parthenon, the symbol of Western civilization, the icon of democracy, was built with stolen money, extorted from subject states who had no say in how it was spent. It is the most beautiful monument to embezzlement in human history. But Pericles didn't just buy buildings, he bought a culture. With this influx of cash, Athens flourished as a center of arts, philosophy, and literature. They built the Theater of Dionysus, the first public theater in history. The city became the Hollywood of antiquity. Playwrights like Sophocles, Euripides, and Aeschylus were producing works that are still performed today. And then there were the big brains. In the bustling agora, you had Socrates, the founder of Western philosophy, annoying everyone with his endless questions about ethics and virtue.
Later, his student Plato would establish the Academy in 387 BC, the first institution of higher education in the Western world. This was where they taught biology, astronomy, mathematics, and history. It was a dazzling display of intellectual power. Athens became the school of Hellas. But the irony was suffocating. While Socrates was debating the nature of justice in the market square, the Athenian fleet was sailing around the Aegean, enforcing the most unjust tyranny imaginable. Athens had become the bully of the server. They preached democracy at home, where every citizen had a voice, but practiced absolute despotism abroad. They believed they were the main characters of history, and everyone else was just an NPC meant to pay taxes. This arrogance did not go unnoticed. While Athens was busy partying, building statues, and counting other people's money, a storm was gathering in the south. Sparta, the leader of the Peloponnesian League, was watching. The Spartans were the complete opposite of Athens. They didn't care about art. They didn't care about navy. They cared about one thing: land war. They looked at Athens' growing power, their arrogance, and their massive walls, and they decided enough was enough. By 431 BC, the tensions had boiled over. The Cold War between the two superpowers was about to turn hot. Athens thought they could buy their way out of anything. They thought their walls were impenetrable and their ships were invincible. They were about to learn a very painful lesson. You can't bribe an army that wants you dead. The Golden Age was about to end in blood. The imperial scam was about to collapse. Get ready for the suicide mission.
By 431 BC, the server was split in two. On one side, you had Athens and its empire of money controlling the seas. On the other side, you had the Peloponnesian League, led by Sparta, the server's premier land warriors who thought money was for weaklings and spent their free time practicing how to stab people more efficiently. This was the Peloponnesian War, and initially, it was a stalemate. It was the classic whale versus elephant scenario. Sparta ravaged the land, but they didn't because of the massive long walls that connected the city to its port. Athens controlled the sea, raiding Sparta's coast, but they couldn't beat the Spartan hoplites in a fair 1v1 on land. For years, the war dragged on. It was a grind. It was boring.
And this is where Athens made the classic gamer mistake. They got greedy. They got bored. And they decided to try a high-risk, high-reward play that was mathematically impossible. In 415 BC, in the middle of a war they weren't winning, the Athenian assembly voted to launch a massive invasion of Sicily. Why Sicily? Because it was rich. Athens thought if they conquered Syracuse, they would have unlimited resources to crush Sparta. It was the ancient equivalent of invading Russia in the winter while your own house is already on fire. They sent a massive fleet, over 100 ships and thousands of their best troops. They stripped the city's defenses bare to fund this expedition. And the result? It was a total party kill. The expedition was a disaster from day one. The commanders argued the locals didn't want to be liberated, and the Spartans, seeing an opportunity, sent a tactical advisor named Gylippus to help the Sicilians. In 413 BC, the trap snapped shut. The great harbor of Syracuse became a graveyard for the Athenian navy. The Athenians were trapped. Their ships were sunk. The survivors were captured and thrown into stone quarries to die of thirst and exposure. The entire expedition force was deleted. Athens lost its fleet, its best soldiers, and its money. The invincible empire was suddenly naked. Back in Greece, Sparta looked at the scoreboard and realized Athens was vulnerable. But Sparta had a problem. They were broke. They knew how to fight, but they didn't know how to pay for ships.
So, in a twist that screams realpolitik, Sparta did the unthinkable. They called their old enemy Persia. Yes, the same Persia that wanted to destroy Greece 60 years ago. Sparta essentially said, hey, remember how much you hate Athens? If you give us gold to build a fleet, we will destroy them for you. Persia agreed. With Persian gold, Sparta built a navy. The final boss fight happened in 405 BC at the Battle of Aegospotami. The Athenian fleet, now a shadow of its former self, was caught beached and unprepared. The Spartan commander, Lysander, didn't even have to try hard. He captured 170 Athenian ships on the beach. It wasn't a battle, it was a spawn kill. Without a navy, Athens couldn't import grain. The Spartans blockaded the port.
The long walls that had protected them for decades became a prison. Starvation set in. The people who once ate off fine pottery were now eating leather and begging for mercy. In 404 BC, Athens surrendered. The Spartans marched in. They didn't burn the city, though their allies wanted to. Instead, they humiliated it. They ordered the long walls, the symbol of Athenian power, to be torn down to the sound of flutes. They dissolved the democracy. They installed a puppet government known as the 30 Tyrants. It was game over. The Golden Age was dead. The empire was gone. The democracy was uninstalled. Athens had played the Game of Thrones, and they had lost. They were now just a broken vassal state, looking at the ruins of their own hubris. But Athens is a survivor.
You can delete the government. You can tear down the walls, but you can't delete the code. The city was down, but the reboot sequence was already initiating. Get ready for the aftermath.
After the Spartan defeat, Athens essentially went AFK, away from keyboard. The city didn't disappear, but it was demoted from server admin to a generic NPC. First, the Macedonians took over. King Philip II and his son, Alexander the Great, treated Athens like a rebellious teenager that needed to be grounded. Athens lost its political independence forever. Then came the Romans in 1460 BC. Now, the Romans actually liked Athens, but they liked it in the same way you like a vintage antique shop. Athens became a university town. Wealthy Roman parents sent their kids there to study philosophy and rhetoric. It wasn't a military power anymore. It was an Ivy League campus for rich Italian kids.
Emperors like Hadrian treated it as a pet project, building libraries and aqueducts just to keep the aesthetic alive. But then, the server ownership changed again and again. The Byzantines took over and converted the Parthenon into a Christian church. Then the Franks and Italians showed up after the Crusades. Finally, in 1458, the Ottoman Empire conquered the city. Under the Ottomans, Athens was just a dusty provincial outpost. The Parthenon was reskinned again. This time, it was converted into a mosque, complete with a minaret. For centuries, the city slept. But in 1687, history decided to wake Athens up with a bang. Literally. The Venetians, who were fighting the Ottomans, laid siege to the city.
Now, the Ottoman commander defending the Acropolis made a tactical decision that ranks among the stupidest moves in human history. He needed a place to store his gunpowder. He looked at the Parthenon, a 2,000-year-old architectural masterpiece, the crown jewel of human civilization, and thought, you know what? This looks like a great place to stack hundreds of barrels of explosives. He assumed the Venetians wouldn't dare shoot at such a historic building. He was wrong. On September 26, 1687, a Venetian mortar shell flew through the air and scored a direct hit on the Parthenon. Boom! The resulting explosion was catastrophic. It blew the roof off, it shattered the walls, it toppled the massive columns. The ruin you see today? That isn't the result of ancient decay.
That isn't time eroding the stone. That is the result of a military blunder from just 300 years ago. The Venetians didn't liberate the city, they turned its greatest monument into a pile of rubble. And to add insult to injury, in the early 1800s, a British guy named Lord Elgin showed up, looked at the wreckage, and decided to rescue the remaining sculptures by shipping them to London. Athens was broken. It was a graveyard of broken marble and forgotten glory. It seemed like the city was destined to fade into history. But as we know, you can't kill a good idea. The 19th century was approaching, and the spirit of revolution was about to bring the server back online.
By the 19th century, the Athens server was practically empty. When the Greeks finally launched the War of Independence in 1821 and kicked the Ottomans out, Athens wasn't a metropolis, it was a ghost town. In 1833, when Prince Otto of Bavaria arrived to become king, the population was only about 10,000 people. That is smaller than a modern high school football stadium. The city lacked basic infrastructure and resources. It was a dead server. But the new admins didn't give up. They initiated a massive reconstruction DLC. They built wide boulevards, public squares, and neoclassical buildings to mimic the glory days. They even revived the Olympic Games in 1896 at the Panathenaic Stadium, inviting the world back to the lobby where competitive sports began.
From World War II occupation to Civil War, and eventually hosting the Olympics again in 2004, Athens has clawed its way back from the brink of deletion time and time again. So, what is the lesson here? Athens teaches us that democracy isn't a perfect divine system handed down by gods. It's a glitchy, messy, man-made code. It started with a toxic admin named Draco. It was patched by Solon. It was updated by Cleisthenes. It was funded by a Mafia scam under Pericles, and it crashed multiple times due to user error. But here's the thing. Despite the bugs, despite the crashes, and despite the fact that it sometimes feels like the whole system is about to explode, it is still the only game worth playing.
Athens proves that you can be burned, looted, and even have your monuments blown up by Venetian mortars, but you can always reboot. The code of democracy is still running. It's up to us to keep debugging it. Thanks for watching the glitched history of Athens. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and fix your own server before judging theirs. Bye.